For more than 40 years, one man managed to do what investigators believed was impossible. He broke into homes in the middle of the night, attacked innocent people, and disappeared without leaving a single clue that could reveal his identity. He committed crimes across California, terrified entire communities, and vanished before police could even understand who they were looking for. Witnesses described different faces, different heights, different voices. Some believed there were multiple offenders working together. Others thought the killer had simply disappeared forever. Years turned into decades. The evidence collected from the crime scenes remained locked away, waiting for a technology that didn't yet exist. By the early 21st century, many detectives accepted a painful reality. The man responsible for dozens of violent crimes would probably never be caught, but they were wrong. In 2018, a single DNA investigation changed everything. It didn't begin with a confession. It didn't begin with a witness. It didn't begin with a fingerprint. It began with a family tree. This is the true story of how one of America's most notorious serial offenders was finally identified after more than 4 decades. To understand how investigators finally caught him, we have to go back to the beginning. California, the mid-1970s, quiet neighborhoods, safe communities. Families slept with their windows open during warm summer nights. People trusted their neighbors. Few imagined that someone was silently watching from the darkness. The first known crimes began in 1974. At first, police believed they were dealing with a skilled burglar. Homes were entered without signs of forced entry. Small personal items disappeared. The thief seemed unusually careful. He studied neighborhoods before entering. He learned family routines. He knew which houses would be empty. But investigators soon realized something was changing. The burglar wasn't simply stealing. He was preparing. He spent hours watching victims before entering their homes. He learned their schedules. He understood which windows remained unlocked. He memorized escape routes. Without realizing it, police were watching the evolution of someone who would become one of America's most dangerous serial offenders. In June 1976, everything changed. A young woman sleeping alone inside her home was awakened by a masked intruder. He threatened her with violence and escaped before officers could respond. Soon, another attack followed, then another, then another. The attacks became more frequent. Entire neighborhoods were overwhelmed with fear. Residents installed stronger locks. Gun sales increased. People formed neighborhood patrols. Parents refused to let children play outside after sunset. Despite these efforts, the attacker continued entering homes. His confidence grew. His planning became more sophisticated. Investigators gave him a name, the East Area Rapist. The title spread quickly through newspapers and television broadcasts. Every new attack made headlines. Police departments received thousands of tips. Sketch artists created multiple composite drawings based on witness descriptions, but none of them led to an arrest. The offender seemed almost invisible. He often entered homes while victims were sleeping. He carried shoelaces to tie them up. He carefully controlled every movement inside the house. He spoke quietly. Sometimes he whispered. Sometimes he remained completely silent. Investigators later believed he enjoyed creating psychological terror as much as committing the crimes themselves. One detail repeatedly appeared in police reports. He often spent hours stalking neighborhoods before attacking. He wasn't choosing victims randomly. He studied them. He watched them. He learned everything he could before making his move. This level of preparation made him incredibly difficult to catch. Every time, investigators believed they understood his methods. He adapted. Police increased patrols. The attacks continued. Helicopters searched neighborhoods. The attacks continued. Hundreds of officers worked overtime. The attacks continued. Residents became exhausted. Every unfamiliar sound during the night created panic. Every barking dog made families look outside their windows. Some people slept with lights on for months. The fear affected entire communities. By 1978, investigators possessed something they had never had before. Biological evidence collected from multiple crime scenes proved that the same offender was responsible for many of the attacks. At the time, DNA profiling did not yet exist. The evidence could be preserved, but it could not identify the man responsible. Police were holding the answer in their evidence rooms. They simply didn't have the technology to read it. Then something unexpected happened. The attacks in Northern California suddenly stopped, without warning, without explanation. Some investigators hoped the offender had died. Others believed he had moved away. A few feared something even worse. What if he wasn't finished? What if he had simply changed his hunting ground? Sadly, they were right. Far to the south, another series of brutal crimes began. Different cities, different police departments, but disturbingly familiar methods. No one yet realized they were hunting the same man. The new crimes began hundreds of miles away. At first, detectives had no reason to believe they were connected to the East Area rapist. The victims were different, the cities were different, even the police departments investigating the cases had never worked together. But the offender's behavior remained strikingly familiar. He attacked at night. He carefully watched his victims before entering their homes. He planned every movement. And just like before, he disappeared without leaving investigators with a name. The attacks became even more violent. This time, victims were murdered. The man the media would later call the original Night Stalker had arrived in Southern California. For years, investigators treated these murders as separate cases. Communication between police agencies was far more limited than it is today. Information traveled slowly. Departments often focused only on crimes within their own jurisdictions. No one could see the entire picture. Then forensic science began to change. During the 1980s, DNA technology was still in its infancy, but by the 1990s, investigators realized something remarkable. Evidence collected from multiple crime scenes across California belonged to the same man, the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker. They weren't two offenders, they were one. A single man had committed crimes across hundreds of miles while successfully avoiding capture for decades. The discovery shocked investigators. They finally understood the scale of what they were facing. But understanding the truth didn't bring them any closer to identifying the suspect. The DNA profile existed. His identity did not. Every year, detectives checked new criminal databases. Nothing. They compared thousands of suspects. Nothing. Former military personnel? Nothing. Construction workers? Nothing. Police officers? Nothing. The DNA never matched anyone. Years passed, detectives retired, new investigators inherited boxes filled with reports, photographs, witness interviews, and forensic evidence. Many believed the killer was already dead. Others believed he had left the country. Some wondered if he had simply become an ordinary old man living a quiet life. The case became one of America's most famous cold cases. Television specials were produced. Books were written. Families of the victims continued waiting for answers. They had waited 20 years, then 30, eventually more than 40. Most cold cases become harder to solve as time passes. Witnesses die, evidence disappears, memories fade. But in this investigation, time would become the greatest advantage detectives ever had. A completely different field of science was beginning to grow. Millions of ordinary people started buying home DNA kits, not because they were solving crimes, because they wanted to know where their families came from. Some wanted to discover Irish ancestors. Others searched for distant cousins. Many simply thought it sounded interesting. They mailed small saliva samples to genealogy companies. Within weeks, they received family trees stretching back generations. Few realized these databases could someday solve murders. Investigators noticed something extraordinary. Even if a criminal had never submitted his own DNA, one of his relatives might have. A cousin, a great aunt, a third cousin, someone who had absolutely nothing to do with any crime. That single realization transformed criminal investigations forever. Instead of searching for one individual, investigators could search for an entire family. This technique became known as investigative genetic genealogy. It had never been used on a case this famous before. The risk was enormous. If it failed, another valuable lead would disappear. If it succeeded, one of America's greatest mysteries could finally end. Specialists uploaded the unknown DNA profile into a public genealogy database where users had voluntarily shared genetic information. The results were surprising. There was no close family match, no brother, no child, no parent, only distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, people who had never heard of the investigation. That meant investigators faced an enormous challenge. They had to build an entire family tree, thousands of names, birth certificates, marriage records, military records, property records, census documents. Every branch had to be traced carefully. Professional genealogists worked alongside detectives. Month after month, they eliminated families, one by one. Eventually, every branch pointed toward a single ancestral line. The list became smaller. Dozens of names became 10. 10 became 5. 5 became 3. Finally, only one man fit every known detail. His name was Joseph James DeAngelo. He had once served as a police officer. The discovery stunned investigators. Suddenly, decades of strange details began making sense. The offender always seemed to understand police tactics. He knew response times. He knew how investigations worked. He knew exactly how to escape before officers arrived. But detectives still had one major problem. Suspicion wasn't enough. They needed a DNA sample that could legally be compared with the evidence collected decades earlier. If the sample didn't match, 40 years of work would collapse overnight. So, investigators began watching him, quietly, patiently, without making a single mistake. They couldn't risk alerting him. If he realized police were watching, he might disappear forever. Every movement mattered. Every day brought them one step closer to learning whether they had finally found the man who had haunted California for more than 4 decades. Investigators followed Joseph James DeAngelo for days. They never approached him. They never questioned him. They never knocked on his door.